Steve, there are three reasons why I'm deeply humbled and overjoyed to have you as a returning guest on the Sunday Sips podcast. The first of which, last month, Olympus teamed up with Revival Healthcare Capital to kick off a massive $500 million build to buy with Swan Endosurgical to move into the GI and luminal robotics spaces. And as you and some of my community are aware, the meat of my technical career was forged at the heart of Johnson & Johnson's multi-billion-dollar build-to-buy and acquisition plays with Verb Surgical and Auris Health, which have progressed the ottava system into IDE in human clinical trials over the last 10 years. So I'm excited to wander through the scars, strategies, and strengths of the build-to-buy approach to bring a surgical robot to market. The second reason that I'm so humbled, excited to have you as a returning guest is that you are a remarkable global medtech entrepreneur. From humble beginnings carrying the bag as an Ethicon sales rep in the 90s to becoming the chief commercial officer of Europe's largest surgical robotics unicorn, CMR, you are an absolute legend. You've raised over 1.5 billion in startup capital, all the while remaining intimately tethered to the unmet needs of the clinicians you serve. And it's been really exciting following you as a leading voice in surgical robotics on LinkedIn, seeing you travel the world to accelerate life saving technology for good. And you just broke the 20,000 follower mark on LinkedIn, which is also incredible. And this leads to the third reason that I'm so humbled and overjoyed to curate this discussion. It's that you have been such an encouragement to me in my journey on so many levels. The connections that you've facilitated on my behalf have been just so deeply humbling. It's provided great opportunities for me. And I've learned so much through your content, through your digital course, through the way you carry yourself as an innovator and your compassion and care for the patients that we all serve, as well as just your tenacity with which you continue to progress new innovation, even when you are in a season where you don't necessarily have to. It's that care that I've really been attracted to. So, Steve, you have a remarkable big brain, and it is a privilege to officially re welcome you to the Sunday Sips podcast, where I carefully curate the latest big brain insights to provide deep reflections worth sipping on. So that's all I got. Let's get to work.
Well, thank you. I'm completely humbled, and I'm pleased to be here. And I support people who deserve supporting, and I think you deserve supporting. And you work hard, and that is one of the tenets that I've had for my entire career, which is work with people who want to, really put the work in. So I appreciate what you do.
Thank you so much. Um, so I have so many questions in so many different spaces, and you've put out some remarkable content just with the Hinatoli walkthrough that I saw recently, as well as you were out in Shanghai with the Microport team. And before we even really dig into build the buys, I want to discuss for someone who might not be aware of all of these different surgical robotics spaces, why different companies choose different strategies to progress a surgical robotic pathway. So for Intuitive, what I know of their origin story is that they started out of like DARPA funding from the military, and then I'm sure they did multiple raises and progressed it and IPO'd. And then you have Medtronic built their own internally, from what understanding. I don't know if they worked with external partnership with Johnson and Johnson. They did a build to buy that was super messy that I lived within. CMR has been their own company. I'm not sure if they've IPO'd or not. I know they're approaching an acquisition. So why do these different models exist to get a company towards a soft tissue robotic solution? So I guess we could start there, and you could wander through
Yeah,
that to whatever level of depth you feel led.
yeah,
Hey, it's the pretentious engineer from the future, and I know you didn't ask, but I have listened to this conversation with Steve countless times at this point during the editing process, and I'd love to share three reasons why it's worth your time to stick around and learn about build to buys in surgical robotics. First of which, me and Steve have a combined 40 plus years of medtech experience across R&D and commercial, and Steve has a disproportionate 30 plus years of experience in those spaces. So everything he says in this podcast is just an absolute gold mine of insights that I hope you gain tons of value from. Second, by the end of this Sunday Sips episode, you'll have a more grounded understanding of build to buy ecosystems as well as other pathways towards progressing surgical robotics innovation. And third, we are going to do a deep competitive analysis of every major player in soft tissue surgical robotics and go system by system and why this system would provide value to different users. So we're looking at segmentation. We're going to touch J&J's Ottava, Intuitive's EP5, Medtronic's Hugo, CMR Surgical's Versius, which I actually got to play with a couple days ago at ACS Congress in Chicago, which was incredible, as well as Metacoroid's Hinotoli and Medbot's Tumai systems, which are fantastic. And then we'll end the discussion with a reflection of Steve's 5 big brain ideas from the podcast. So I took deep notes and we'll kind of cover back over all the big brain insights he has to share with you that you could apply into your innovation context. But I deeply appreciate you, friend. I hope this is a valuable discussion for you. I put a lot of heart into curating this and editing this on your behalf. And before we jump back in, a quick word from Joe from the past about today's sponsor. Hey, Pretentious Engineer here. I know you didn't ask, but this episode of Sunday Sips is caffeinated by Kinetic Vision. Throughout my decade-long career in surgical robotics, I've worked with many medtech consultants, and without question, Kinetic Vision stands in a league of their own. They masterfully curate the art of science, accelerating innovation through advanced technology. Their capabilities, creativity, and candor have consistently made them my most trusted digital external innovation partner. We've collaborated across continents and time zones, tackling challenges and unconventional ideas and taking them from white paper to fully functional MVPs. Their contributions, from early concept generation to usability studies, test automations, digital twin creation, VR simulations, and beyond, have been pivotal in moving breakthrough ideas towards real world clinical use. My partnership with Kinetic Vision has been a decade in the making, and it's an honor to introduce you to their world class capabilities. If you're facing technical challenges beyond what you can do in house, I trust Kinetic Vision to help you find the path forward and empower you to innovate on behalf of global patients and the clinicians you serve. Finding the right partner to drive digital transformation within your organization and product pipeline is critical to the long-term success of a medtech business. So check out the link in the description below to take the Digital External Innovation Readiness Assessment, which includes a waitlist for experiencing a discovery session with Kinetic Vision. It'll take you less time than it takes to finish your coffee or tea, and it'll provide you with greater clarity on if Kinetic Vision is right for you. Anyways, you could sip on that, and let's get back to Sunday Sips.
No problem. So again, I think that you know, the granddaddy of it was intuitive, but at the same time, computer motion. You have to remember, a lot of people forget that computer motion started at the same time as intuitive, and there was the DARPA-funded intuitive, and it was a lot of the genesis of that was for a battlefield robot,
Mm-hmm.
so that troops on the front line could get surgery on the front line remotely via beaming, basically it was microwaves off circulating planes. Great,
Oh, really?
phenomenal. Yeah. It was really interesting. I've got on my blog. I've
Yeah.
actually got a little thing on the history of it. And I talked with some of the people who were behind that original concept. Rick Savata is one of them, people like that. So then they realized that actually most injured servicemen actually get taken back. They get patched up, they get hemostats, and they get taken back to a field hospital. So it wasn't quite that way, but the technology was there. So it was originally designed as a telesurgical robot. That was the original
Yeah.
design. And then they realized, well, actually, it's got some place in the normal operating room because of the precision, the 3D vision, etc. And Intuitive did a really good job, and they went for the boom style robot, whereas Computer Motion at the same time went for an open screen and the modular robot, which was actually bed
Really?
mounted.
Okay,
Yes,
I
so
know
computer.
nothing about this company. Did it?
Oh,
I'm
right. So
assuming it failed. Yeah.
yeah. Well, no, it didn't fail. It got bought by. It sort of got merged with Intuitive. So
Oh,
yeah. So Yulin Wang is Yulin Wang's company, and Computer Motion actually is the first bed mounted robot, and it was bed mounted. It was called Zeus, and it was an open console, and they actually did the first telesurgery, which was the Lindbergh procedure, which was Jack Moresco who did that just before 9/11. And they both went for the two different concepts, and what happened is they ended up in some kind of big legal fight, and then they ended up sort of merging, and the computer motion side of it got canned. That's
yeah.
why I still believe that Intuitive is going to one day come out with a bed mounted ASC robot. 'Cause
Yeah.
they know that. So they've built internally because it was from a project, a research project that was built, and they built it internally. If you look at other companies, you have to look at what their motives are. So, a J&J or a Medtronic, they sort of poo-pooed and laughed at the robots a little bit when they first came out. Who's ever going to use a cardiac robot, which is what Intuitive was,
Yep.
for a general surgery purpose? Who's ever going to do that? Who's mad enough to ever use it for that? And then what happened is Intuitive failed in cardiac. They couldn't make a business out of it. It worked technically, but it failed as a product. And they were very lucky that a urologist used it for the prostate, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Mhm.
But as it was doing prostates, neither Medtronic or J&J are really that bothered about urologists. They don't do a lot with urologists, maybe for some different neobladder reconstruction and things like that, but not a lot. So as long as they were staying with the urologists, it wasn't affecting their business. Then step forward to the XI, which was really designed for general surgery, and it hit their general surgery, so gynecology, general surgery, things what they do care about, where there's energy and stapling. So their motives were, how do we as rapidly as possible do something? And Medtronics was not an internal development. It was
Okay.
actually, so they went to Germany, they went to DLR, which was part of the aerospace robotics, and they did a deal with DLR there for a system, which again was a bed mounted system. You can go and see the old
Interesting.
DLR. Yeah, you can go and see the old DLR robot, and that got taken in with an internal program, and then it morphed into Hugo. What it became Hugo. And J&J, you know the story better than me. They did sort of a seeded build to buy where they decided to put Verb together with Google. So they thought, great, all the software guys with some of these new advanced robotics guys. And then they decided they needed Auris on top of it, merge the whole thing together. And that was kind of been a little bit of a messy merge. And there's lots of documents out there. And even on my site, again, you can read.
Yeah.
But their motives were, how do we protect our surgery business from the robot? And the thinking then is, how do we make sure that our staplers and energy devices are front and center on the robots? So that's kind of the genesis of them.
Mhm.
If you take somebody like CMR Surgical, you basically had a group of people at the UK, the founders at the UK, and it was heavily influenced by somebody like Mark Slack as well. But there was Keith, there was Paul Roberts, and there was Luke, and there was Martin. And what they were more concerned about was that they couldn't understand why robotics wasn't getting more adoption in places like the UK. So they came at it from a completely different angle. And everyone thinks it's a Cambridge University spin out. It's not. It's got nothing to do with Cambridge University. Though those guys all work for different Cambridge consultants like Sagentia, or I think one of them worked for maybe Cambridge Consultants or something. And they came out of there with having seen a lot of the robots and the failings of it, and thought, well, we can do better than this. And their motivation was really to build a robot that would be much more suited to something like the NHS,
Yeah.
or much more suited to laparoscopy, because Mark Slack had a lot of influence on that. So their entire robot is so different than Intuitive because of that genesis. And then you got Hinatori that
Mhm.
decided there. You got the Chinese robots that are just really trying to make a Chinese version of the Da Vinci's in many great parts. And then you had others out there like Distal Motions or Moons that are trying to do something radically different to try and fit the lower acuity procedures. It's different motives for different reasons. And that's probably confused some of your listeners, because none of that will make sense to many of them.
Well, and my plan, because I forgot to mention this, like I will make this conversation accessible after the fact. So I do a breakdown with like sketching, and I pull up pictures and go through architecture. So we'll speak at this level, and then we'll contextualize it in second sips, which is fine. For me, it's really exciting actually to hear some of these little pieces of history I didn't have. Because when I started in Ethicon, I worked first on our handheld business and ultrasonic technology. There was this strange movement that started to occur before we announced what was going on with Verb Surgical, where a lot of our technical heavy hitters, the fellows, folks like that, were starting to move to this other building because we had multiple buildings and they were kind of being, ring looped together. And eventually I ended up in there because they needed a new college hire. So I snuck my way into robotics, and then they closed the door to other new college hires later. So I was the only one to ride that wave from design into robotics controls into systems engineering, which was fantastic. So it's the 16th engineer in that space. And it was really apparent that we knew laparoscopic surgery incredibly well. We knew stapling,
Yes.
we knew energy devices. But I think there was a strange audacity that we could immediately move into robotics and see success at it. And then fast forward 10 years later, we're finally doing it in humans. I'm really excited to see where the platform lands. But I remember probably in the first couple months, I stumbled upon a TED talk by, what's her name? Catherine Moore, I think is her last
Yeah.
name from
Yeah.
Intuitive. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like a TED talk she had done 6 or 8 years prior that was showing the single port, but it was like very developmental. But she
Yeah.
was also showing like early ICG and the ability to like visualize things happening inside the body and to be able to pinpoint this. And I was looking at what we were building towards, and I was like, I feel like we're worlds behind wherever Intuitive's going. Like I was a little bit ignorant and naive to just how much power Intuitive had in this market, just building decade after decade in these spaces. So it's really exciting to see how larger strategics are actually trying to meet that standard or go beyond it with a different OR footprint or different differentiated tools. But it is there's been, I think, multiple seasons of humbling within Johnson and Johnson as they've
It's
stepped into these spaces.
Well, I think there's a couple of problems that happen. One of the problems is that engineers often benchmark on the wrong thing. So I know that a lot of the companies, would say, "Well, we've got a robot and we're looking at it," and they'd have like not even the SI, they'd have the S, which was the original, with
Mhm.
three arms or whatever, and you go, "But that's not what's in the operating room today." And the
Yeah.
engineers were looking at things like the performance characteristics of that robot for latency and lag and movement and unintended motion and all those things. And they're like three generations out. So one of the other things that I think is humbling, people had in their mind a lot of what I would call almost memes about the robots. And some of it was from the performance characteristics of the robots they were looking at. And a lot of it came because the surgeons who wanted to talk to them were upset with Intuitive for whatever reason. They weren't
Mhm.
their trainers or whatever. And there was just so many sort of memes out there. Oh, Intuitive are horrible people and every surgeon hates them. Complete nonsense. You know, um,
I heard those memes.
yeah,
That was
exactly.
part of our market research was that
Yeah,
folks will immediately convert into ottava just because of the power of the J&J brand, and
yes.
it's
Yeah,
better, it's not intuitive.
exactly. And they're all wanting an alternative away from Intuitive. And the actual reality of the world is when you actually get out there is the reality is they want an alternative to reduce the price, but they'd like to actually have a reduced price Intuitive. That was
Yeah.
the reality of what was out there. And even that's sort of disappearing a little bit now as Intuitive's commercial offering has loosened up a bit, and
Mhm.
they are by no means the most expensive robot on the market when you look at cost per procedure. And I think all of these things from when people were thinking of 2010, I mean, we're 15 years on from there, and the world has changed radically. But there's lots of motives of why companies went down these different routes, and a lot of companies um, take Hinatori through the Kawasaki and Sysmex Medicoroid. Of course, Kawasaki is going to build their own robot. I mean, they've got industrial
Yes.
robots a go go, and having been on the system, it is gorgeous as a robot. I mean, the arms, the movements, the joints, you can tell everything on that is from a well renowned robotics company that knows how to make robots. But it's an industrial robot, right? Let's face it.
Yeah.
But they know how to do the over engineering really well. So a lot of this comes from the DNA of where you started. A lot of it comes from the motivation you have as a company. Am I trying to defend business or disrupt business? And a lot of it comes from also the characters that were in that room. How much did they know the robotics space? Was it like Mark Slack, a surgeon who was a very successful and good laparoscopist? Well, of course, the robot's going to be very laparoscopic because you've got
Mhm.
a laparoscopic master who's putting their design into it. So of course, it's going to be very very good from that point of view. You've got Moon Surgical, which comes out of France. So it's of course it's going to have the influence of the two French inventors, which are laparoscopists. So Moon is a laparoscopic robot because the two laparoscopists behind it wanted to enhance laparoscopy. If you go back to the origins, they generally tell you where these things really, really come from. And if you look even again, if you look at Verb and Google, if you've got a bunch of super dreaming engineers from Google who it's the mantra is make it, break it fast and learn, which is very different to medical device.
Yes.
Um, then, of course, you're going to have a very software ecosystem based design at Verb, where a lot of it is about the software and about the entire way the software connects across the entire ecosystem. And you're going to design probably, and I've seen some of the patent concepts of the Verb
Hmm.
console. It's going to be a very information rich console because you're going to want this flood of information coming in that the Google engineers are driving towards. So a lot of it comes to the personalities that are behind it as well.
Well, and Scott, I always forget his last name. Hunnekens.
Hunnikins, Scott Hunnikins,
Hunnekens.
yeah,
Yeah, it was very humbling to cross paths with him in the early Verb days as well, and the digital surgery 4.0 vision that he was communicating.
yeah,
And I think for me, it was interesting to live in the tension between the vision that the CEOs cast and of where this business will go. But then for me, seeing like, well, what will the reality of the release one system with the tools be? And then how do you sell across that gap? And what I
yeah,
don't know where, ottava will land commercially now because I've been away from it for a while. But it's just exciting to see how founders have to create this vision and pull people around it and find the
yeah,
right way to leverage capital to build it. And you get all these different pain points along the
yep.
way and restarts. So I guess going into like CMR didn't do build to buy. There wasn't a buyer set up with it. Why do you
Uh,
think it went
well,
that way?
so
Or is
so
it complicated?
yes and no. If you go, if you can actually go and look at the cap table and who the investors
Mm.
were in this, it wasn't a build to buy. It definitely wasn't a build to buy. It was
Yeah.
a group. It was a group of four nutty founders out of Cambridge who were brilliant, who then teamed up with a surgeon, and then they just did magic. They really did magic.
Yeah.
But there were some strategics behind them. Medtronic invested in them in the early days, and so did
Mhm.
General Electric. GE Healthcare invested in them in the early days. And I think that a lot of the strategics were looking at, placing some bets everywhere. But Versius was built to be a standalone business. CMR was built to be a
Yeah.
standalone business and a standalone product. And yeah, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't a build to buy, and it definitely wasn't a Cambridge University spin out.
Yeah. And you went full commercial with it, which I think is
Oh
beautiful
yeah,
because it's contrary to a lot of the advice at least that circulates from like Joe Mullins now on if a strategic's getting into this space, they need to find something, they need to invest in it, they need to do the build to buy, and then they pick it up and they commercialize it and scale it. You don't want to be owning the commercial strategy as well as the technology development. But CMR's done the whole end to end, and it seems very disruptive. So I mean, how did you get that far? Because it's approaching an
yeah,
acquisition as well, right? Or did
yeah.
that pause or go
Well,
quiet?
no, I don't. Yeah, I'm not so sure where they are with the acquisition. I mean, I hope they do get bought. I really do. I think
Yeah.
that's a technology that deserves to really, be boosted forwards, and I wish them all the luck for that to happen. The commercialization side of it was we sort of realised at the time. Well, you got to remember at the time we were sort of the number two,
Yeah.
and we realised that the robot, and I still believe this today, it requires a lot of care, love, and attention. It's not a transactional sale at all. You basically set up a program for 7 years, and you own that program for 7 years, and you're involved in it for 7 years. And I was a strong proponent and believer that you have to have commercial control of that. We also had to have commercial control of how the deals were done because we were trying to disrupt. At that time, remember, the lease and the managed service was not big, and we came up with this idea of doing the lease and the managed service, and that was disruptive, where you pay per
Ah,
click, a bit like the
mhm.
photocopier world. Um,
Yeah.
and a lot of that you had to control by being direct. Plus, we also wanted to control the level of the training, the quality of the training, the quality of the messaging. All those things were very important to us as a company, and you could only really do that as direct. And we were very lucky that we hit almost like an investment bubble when you could take 600 million of investment in a round, and you could
Yeah.
get the soft banks, and you could get the alley bridges, and you could get some of the big investors to put money into you because everyone was still had hopes and dreams in those days.
Yeah.
I think the reality of today, and I think Joe is pretty right. I mean, you need $1 billion plus from when your product's ready if you want to go and take a run at it yourself commercially.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that is that the money is going a lot into things like, you know, and I talk about this on my course. You spend a lot of money setting up companies,
Yes.
setting up
In all the different
H-
countries and all
HR
the yeah, the
departments,
legal stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
Hey, Pretentious Engineer here. I know you didn't ask, but this week's episode of Sunday Sips is caffeinated by How to Start Up in MedTech, which is curated by the remarkable Steve Bell. Steve Bell has had his hands over tons of medtech innovation over the last 30 plus years, including being the chief commercial officer of CMR Surgical, which is Europe's largest surgical robotics unicorn. If you're not aware of this company, they have progressed an incredible robotic surgical system called Versius. I had the opportunity to drive this system just a couple days ago in Chicago at the ACS Surgical Congress, and it is a remarkable, beautiful piece of technology to improve patient outcome. It has an incredibly low OR footprint, and you could just see the touches of his craftsmanship on this platform over the years. So, really excited to bring you into proximity with Steve. He's a returning guest on the podcast. So, here's an episode I did with him as well. But what I want to share with you is he has a course called How to Start Up in MedTech. And I took the course, it's 100 modules, and I actually recorded a video testimonial if you want to check out how it's changed my life. I recorded this in my Honda Odyssey, where I consumed most of this course. But if we just pop in for a minute, I'll show you one module and I'll share a special deal that Steve's extended to members of my community. So, first of all, if we hop right in, or sorry, how to build and run a startup in MedTech is what the course is called. And he's broken it down into multiple phases. If I scroll down a little bit, you have the early stages, Series A, Series B, Series C, and then all of these contain both video modules, but also like templates you can leverage, like PDF documents. So, one that I really enjoyed was called Greed and Fear, which we'll watch. But before we jump into this, I just want to let you know that there is a promo code. So if you decide to purchase this course and check it out and really immerse under his teaching and insight, if you use the promo code BIGBRAIN30, all capital letters, BIGBRAIN 30, all one word, you'll get 30% off of this course, which is an incredible deal. It's incredibly generous from Steve to both curate this for us, but also for you to be able to get it at that price. So I'd highly recommend it. I'll show you the first minute of this module that I love about what motivates large strategics to actually look at a potential acquisition, and then we'll hop right back into the Sunday Sips episode. So here you go. Enjoy.
I'm coming towards the end of what I wanted to give you information on for the Series C round. And maybe it's now a good time for the next two videos to talk a little bit about potential exit. It's never too early to think about an exit, but it's very rare that you'll get an exit in the Series C. But it can happen, but it's since 2008 that's become very, very rare. But what I want to talk about as we think towards strategics who may well be interested in you as a company is what are their motivators for why would they be interested in you? I mean, they've already got multi-billion-dollar businesses. Why do they care about you? My experience over the years, having been inside the big companies, having worked with the big companies and done exits, is companies tend to work from two emotions. There is fear and there is greed. Yeah. Yeah. And that's not a wise use of your money, as a growing company in that kind of difficult of technology. And I think that the right split is let the startups do the startup stuff that they're really amazing at. Get out of their way, fund them, and let them go. And the beauty of build to buy is if it's done correctly, like has been done with Swan and Surgical, the CEO and the C-suite will not be spending 23 of 24 hours a day raising money.
Yeah.
They will be spending those 23 or 24 hours building the best damn product that can be on the market. Right. And that is really important. I think that's one of the massive advantages in build to buy. And I think that let the development company, the R&D teams, just make it, break it, fix it, get it right, and get the right thing without corporate interference. That's essential. Then the second thing on being built to buy is when it's at the milestone that you say, okay, the baby's ready. Okay. You deliver that baby and hand it over to the world experts on commercialization, who are the strategics. And if you think that a small startup can be as impactful, fast, and good, and it can be as good, but not as impactful, fast, and as rapid and as cash efficient as a Medtronic or a J&J or a Stryker or an Olympus, you're delusional. They
Yeah.
have everything plug and play to go. It doesn't mean it'll be smooth sailing, because if you put it in the hands of the wrong sales team in the organization and you incentivize them wrong, and you try and say, well, this is just like selling an endoscope, that will be a rude awakening. And I do wonder, by the way, with Ottava, if they're really going to split out the sales forces correctly. And I think there's pros and cons on both, and it'll be interesting to see how they and Medtronic end up in the end, because Intuitive is really super focused right down the line on the
Yeah.
road, and they're not worrying also about am I selling the staplers and the sutures and etc. So again, but in general, 30,000 feet. Let the R&D team in the startup do their work. Bring them in, integrate them, and most of them won't stay, but give them 2 years without punishing them, without forcing them in a square peg in a round hole, and then let them get on with their bit and really concentrate on commercialization as the big company. And I think it's a win. I think it's a win.
Yeah. And I want to talk through the potential of wins with Olympus because I have so many thoughts in this space. But maybe not a win from the J&J days. One of the challenges we ran into is just culture differences as well.
Yeah.
So when you have engineers that where you draw this boundary between Ethicon making instruments and a startup making the robot, but you still have to deliver one clinically relevant solution. That's where
Yes.
we drew our interface from a build to buy perspective. Required collaboration, but you have different incentives occurring.
Yeah.
Even if it's just like engineers at Ethicon wanting to have normal engineering workflow and normal work
Yeah.
life balance, then you have an aggressive startup culture and mismanaged incentives. One company's trying to cross through the milestones to get acquired, other folks are
Yeah.
progressing their careers and the technology. I wouldn't say one group cares more about the solution than
No.
the other. You just have different clash of mismanaged incentives and alignment, which I did a lot of in systems engineering, is
Yeah.
quite complex in those areas.
Yeah.
So, how would you suggest where you have deep technical expertise in a domain within the strategic that has to cross over into this startup, how to set that right from the start? So, if you look at
Yeah.
Olympus and all of their expertise in advanced optics
Yeah.
and bronchoscopes and things that
Yeah.
bend,
Yep.
how do you imagine collaboration occurring between these different partners?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always see it like you can't mix salt water and fresh water very well. You end up with a really sort of like a briny soup
Hmm.
in the estuary.
Yeah.
My thinking is product development is product development. You've got to get the whole thing at the company. You can't leave instrument engineers under legacy ways of working, etc. I don't think the interface works as it should. My feeling is you've got to take all the development in house. Now you can take those people, put them in, but they have to live under the regime of fast, rapid startups.
Hmm.
You can explant them and re-implant them into things so that you don't lose the knowledge. But I don't believe you can do this chimera thing where you have two completely diverse teams and you think the interface is going to work. I don't think it does. I think the friction becomes high and then politics creep in. Who is this? Is it the dog or the tail? Who's wagging who? Is the robot the dog or is the mothership the dog? Well, the instrument just tags onto the robot, so surely that's the tail, right? Well, no, because the mothership owns the dog, so
Yeah.
therefore we are the dog. So this whole thing becomes a complete political mess. It becomes a corporate startup mesh, and it just doesn't work. So what I would do, and I think this is what Swan Ender Surgical will do, is we'll lean on you if we need some help, but we own it.
Hmm.
We own the optics, we own the articulation, we own the instrumentation, we own the roboticness. However, instead of us going to a third party optics provider, we'll come and treat you as a third party optics provider. If we need to go and get some kind of end effectors, well, you're going to be our first choice, but not our only choice, by the way.
Hmm.
And I think what it is it really has to run as independent. The minute that the corporate suits and finance get their little claws into the business, it's dead, because you then get political mismanagement. You get long-time company lifers who don't understand the startup, who start making really odd decisions that don't fit and jive with what you're trying to do as the startup. And I know that in many of the companies that have tried to do this, where they've tried to keep the entire corporate oversight, it's been a complete train wreck. And interestingly, Joe Mullings, when I talked with him lot on this, he was very heavily involved in the early days with Scott Honekins and
Yep.
Verb,
He built
and
out that
he, yeah, he does, and and I think he um, really says quite strongly, you can't. It's one or the other. It's got to be binary. But when you have this kind of hybrid thing, it's going to die. So I think and I hope Swan Ender Surgical has done the right thing, which is to say, we are going to bring it back to you when it's ready. Get out of our way. We will try and so there are some things you can leverage on, right, where it doesn't impact. So, for example, if you've got a quality system software, use the same one. If you've got a format for quality documents, try and use the same one. If there's some testing protocols that are really important for both companies and you've got a choice and it's not going to slow you down, then use the one that Olympus uses. If it's a way of testing the optics or testing the light or whatever, try and at least look for the overlap. But if it doesn't work for you, you're not forced down it. You're laughing, so obviously that
So
feels
no, there's a story. I'm sorry. We When we started, we had different requirement management systems. We had different CAD systems, and we had different units. And everything we had to have multiple units on Cascade. It was just like a nightmare. Even within Ethicon, we would have different CAD softwares or units depending on whether you were in energy or stapling. It was just something legacy that was never harmonized for
yeah,
a season, and then that came into instruments, and then it's the instrument, the tail, or the dog who owns it. Like I've had all of these conversations, so it's interesting just seeing how much money and time gets burned figuring that out as you go, as opposed to setting it up right from the start.
yeah.
And that's why, like, I love all the stories you have, and it's exciting to see where Olympus can go in these spaces and other build to buys that happen, because I think there's right ways and
Yeah.
suboptimal ways to approach it, just based on how company steps into these spaces.
I think, again, where it's non-critical and where it can just be harmonized,
Mhm.
and it also makes sense from a cost point of view, from a leverage point of view,
Yeah.
from an understanding point of view, you go for it wholehearted. If it's something critical to the development where the methodology or the system or the SOP or whatever it be from the mothership company would get in the way, willfully abandon it, right?
Yeah.
And do what you need to do to get it done. And it really, one of the big things that this is about, and I think there'll be some books written about um, a lot of these company built to buy things, is the governance. You have to have the governance before you sign the paper. You can't be the CEO of something like a Swan Ender Surgical, but be under the governance of a senior person in Olympus. That's never going to work.
Mhm.
CEOs and COOs and the C-suite of Swan and Surgical will have to make their decisions. The CTO of Swan is going to have to make a lot of tough decisions, and they can't rely on a 6-week meeting wait for a group of engineers who are not even close to the business to make a decision on this, or a finance person in corporate who's going to say, well, actually, we've had a bit of a rough quarter this quarter, so we'd like you to just shut everything down. That can't happen. There has to be a massive governance firewall between the two, and it has to be clear. But again, there's lots of good learnings out of the big companies. Compliance, a lot of startups get that wrong and fail
Yeah.
miserably later because of compliance. Um, if there is really good knowledge in someone like Olympus and they do have brilliant optics, for example, then you would be foolish not to lean on it, but you can't be reliant on it, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
You can't get your lead times crossed over and your incentives mixed between the two organizations.
Yeah,
Trust.
yeah,
Oh my gosh, this is so valuable, Steve. And it's so cathartic to relive some of these experiences and just hear that there's a different way for future medtech innovation in these spaces. One of the advantages of build to buy that you touched over really quick was just that the CEO can focus on putting out the right product. And in your
yes,
course, one of the things that surprised me around Series C and Series D, I think you emphasized it was like this: the CEO's job is to go out and get as much funding as possible.
yes,
Even if you think you have cash flow, go get more cash flow. Let your COO do their job. And what I find really interesting about the build to buy model is the cash is set aside on the table. You have that established so that you could actually lead the strategic vision of the company, and where are you taking your people and what are they developing, which is interesting. Um, so I guess like how would you encourage CEOs or mentor CEOs differently that are operating within a build to buy versus a
yeah,
traditional tech startup? Because I think pulling on those threads is helpful because they're two
yeah.
different working conditions you have to build towards or incentives.
So when you're not in the build to buy, you're working in spurts of cash. You're working on spend, spend, spend. Oh, quick, quick, we're running out of money. Burns too high. Stop, 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 stop. And it's kind of this fluctuation up and down. And then what you do is, especially go to the bigger rounds, the C rounds, the D rounds, you end up with the entire C suite being pulled into the funding in a large proportion of their time. Like the CFO will be spending a lot of time making the data rooms right and making sure the financials are right. And this month's financials are not next month's financials. And it changes, as you go through 6 months of diligence. And it completely and utterly distracts the team. And the CEO of a startup is genuinely just out with the begging bowl continuously. And the minute you close the round, you all have a little glass of champagne and you all say great. And then the CEO's back out with the begging bowl again, getting for the next round because you're going to be out of money again soon. I think the beauty of the build to buy if done correctly and the financing structure is done correctly. It doesn't all get given at once because you can end up spending like drunken sailors. So what you have to do is meter it out correctly, but know that the runway is there and know that you've got funding through to the end milestone and dry powder somewhere that should there be something unforeseen, like the FDA went from 510Ks to de novos with
Yeah,
robots. That's a 2-3 year delay for everybody. Whatever happens, you can ride it out. But it allows the CEO to focus on the operational side of things and building the best product. And that means that they can actually give more in to the COO. And the COO is 100% doing the COO. The CTO is 100% doing the CTO. The CFO is doing the finance of the startup, not trying to go out and raise money. And if I look back on my time of how much or what proportion of teams' time is spent doing that dog and pony show around the
yeah,
world, 300 meetings to raise your money, it's completely ineffective. And I think what you get with the build to buy is you free them from that. You free the team from that. And that's why I think they can go faster and they can be more focused. And it stops them making suboptimal decisions. The suboptimal decisions are we're about to run out of cash. We're going to have to do A or B, when really we need to do A and B.
yeah,
And I think in a build to buy, you can be a little bit more bold and say we can keep going with A and B because the cash is there. And we know that the next round is already locked. We can make that happen. And something for that, for example, would be if you're doing product development, you can do more of a waterfall development rather than just a pure linear gated development. And you can bring stuff forward before a stage gate review and say on risk, we'll let you go with that. And that is a huge advantage in a startup. It can cause chaos if you get it wrong, but if it's managed in the right way, and you do waterfall in the right way, you can actually shave big chunks of time off your product development. And that when you're talking about startups, one of their edges is speed. So if that one act of allowing the financing to be pre-programmed can actually allow you to accelerate and go faster. So I'm all in favor of it.
Yeah. And so when you're in a build to buy, is the CEO functioning not the same, but similar to a CEO of a traditional strategic then at that point? Like you're building the team, you're focused on keeping the stakeholders aligned with the vision and where things are tracking, as opposed to having to be a traditional scrappy CEO of going out with the bowl like you're talking about. Because it seems like you're more of like actually building.
Yeah,
And I don't
I
know if
think
I'm
I think
oversimplifying it. I know there's
no,
differences
no,
between Gorski or J&J or things like that
yeah,
versus a
yeah.
startup. Like they're completely different worlds.
Yeah, no, no,
Um,
look, it's different, but what it allows them to do is it allows them to be focused on the right things that push the business forward, and I think it allows them to breathe a little bit differently when they're thinking about the business, but they're still going to do a lot of the same things as a startup CEO. So you've still got to manage the investors, you've still got to do all those updates, you've still got to go out to the market and be the face of the company. It's not guaranteed 100% that Olympus will buy them. I mean, that's the way it's wired, but
yeah.
Olympus has a big crash and something happens, they decide not to buy them, the market changes, the wind changes. So you can't 100% rely on it and that's your definite exit. So you still got to woo the market a little bit and you've still got to do your CEO dog and pony show a little bit, but it definitely frees up more of your 80% to work on things like culture, to work on things like um, uh, the C team all pulling in the same direction. It allows you to do things like be a little bit more down in the weeds where you shouldn't be normally as a CEO because you've not got time to do it. But if you are the CEO, being down on the ground floor has many advantages, understanding the business at the fundamentals, the development at the fundamentals, the team at the fundamentals, and being present for the team, not being locked in your office and then running off to investor meetings. All these small things add up and change the dynamic of the startup. So I think you get so many benefits with the build to buy. And for me, as I sit here, if I could do every single startup as a build to buy, I think the whole industry would do better.
Yeah.
I honestly, I think they do better.
You'd see
And I
more
think what,
products to market,
yo,
most
it's
likely.
more to market. And what I think is one of the hardest things is, and I even believe that Olympus has still got their own parallel pathway going inside the company, which
Mhm.
I find a little bit bonkers, right? That it's burn your boats,
Yeah.
take your R&D teams and release them and free them and put them into the, even if it's on secondment for a long time. But what I think the strategics will find very hard is also giving up their own innovation R&D. I would farm it all out. The whole thing would go out there. I would have three R&D teams. I would have the ones that are outsourced as the build to buys. I would have the internal incremental teams that are trying to eke 5 cents out of a catheter and trying to make design for manufacture better and trying to make the product better and make a stapler slightly longer. And so
Life
you don't get
cycle
rid
as
of R&D.
well.
Yeah,
And
life
yeah.
cycle, product life cycle, exactly. But keep them really focused on that, not trying to be all things to all people. But I would also have the third team in there, which is the team called the Destructor team. And it would be a small group of people whose sole job is to destroy your business. Their only job is to work out how would you destroy our products? How would you destroy what the startup's doing? How would you innovate around them? And it doesn't mean they're going to make the product, but what they're doing is they're working out what every other startup out there is trying to do. They're trying to work in the same mindset of that. They have no sacred cows and they can just totally destroy. So, for example, if you're in a Medtronic or you're in a J&J, I'd have a team that's called Stapler Destruction. And their job would just be work out 15 ways to replace staplers.
Mhm.
Two things come out of that. One is you understand what might be coming down the road. But number two, surprise innovation would pop out of that. Oh, I get balloons.
Oh,
Look at that.
fun.
I get balloons. Um,
That's
I
awesome.
they celebrate the destruction team.
I've
So
never seen that.
It's some kind of thing that I don't know what it is. It's some kind of thing on Macs that
It's
allows it to.
hilarious. Said surprise or something. It just
Yeah,
goes
no,
off.
but I get a thumbs up as well. I think if I do a thumbs up, should I try the thumbs up? No. Yes, there it goes.
It's hilarious.
So innovation, you see.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'll have the destructor teams in there as well. But you can't have both. And I think just for the real startup innovation, it rarely works well in a big company. Some companies actually manage it okay. I think Intuitive does a fairly good job of it, but I think even they're probably slowing down there. And it's not because of the people. It's because of
Inertia in the business,
yeah,
right?
the inertia in the business and the mechanics and what you have to protect and paperwork builds up and finance. It's the molasses builds up in the system, and unless you take people out and put them in a molasses free environment, they can't run at the speed that they need to run at. So I don't think it's rocket scientists, but that's going to, I think, going to be one of the hardest things for some CTO in a big company to say, well, you don't want us to do any sort of like big innovation. No, take that entire budget and give it to that company. That's a hard thing for people to do, but it looks like Olympus have at least got most of the way there.
Excellent. So to build on that, so we have the large build to buy with Olympus. From what you know of different medtech strategics and different clinical robotic spaces that are starting to progress, like what do you see as the next build to buy? Because right now Olympus is going into GI and Illuminal. I know that you've
Yeah,
talked about other there's plenty of different robotic spaces to move into. So just what would you imagine?
yeah. So I think some of the endovascular, neurovascular side of things, although what might happen there is it's going to be like some kind of buy to build to buy, which will be there's a company out there, something like, I don't know, let's say XCath, right? And
Okay.
they're really making progress. And G has just seen that Stryker and Siemens have got together to do their neuro robot that they're going to do, and
Yep.
they think, oh God, we need something, and we don't have a robot. And Siemens bought Corindus back in the day. What do we do? What do we do? So what they could do is go and actually almost buy something like an XCath, take majority ownership, fund them to the hilt, buy them in as an asset, but keep them spun out,
Okay.
and then build to buy as if they were a build to buy, but get the ownership. They just say, we're going to fund you to the end now as a build to buy. So it's a company that's already out there that's doing something. I think that's a next generation of build to buy, or a spin of build to buy.
Yeah.
And I think in that space, there's Nanoflex, there's XCath, there's several um, companies in that space that could be great assets that if you were a company now trying to keep up in that space, you could easily go to and just say, okay, we're going to treat you like a build to buy. Imagine you've never been done before, but we're going to now fund you like a build to buy, and we'll put an agreement in place like a build to buy. I think that's got some sense.
It's so interesting because it's the inverse of like J&J's model, right? So J&J operates like a large private equity firm and they'll wait till somebody typically clears FDA and then they'll
Yeah.
acquire and scale and commercialize.
Yeah.
But you'd almost have them buy an asset much earlier along the continuum like Edwards. But then rather than having that startup do what they were doing, just give them money to build exactly what you actually want them to build
Yeah.
as like an incubator.
Yeah. Because you gain control over it, and you also gain
Yeah.
the exit, and you gain the pre-wired money on it. And again, what you do if you do that in a clever way is that a company like an XCath or a Nanoflex, you basically guarantee you don't focus on building a sales force and a go-to-market channel.
Yeah.
We will take care of that. You just keep doing what you're doing in a brilliant way. And they sort of do that in some ways with J&J DC money, but I'm on about a real bold move. I'm on
Yeah.
about Stryker going and sticking their chips down on something and say, you take that to conclusion and we'll commercialize it. And there are small examples of that happening. I think Boston Scientific did something similar in the past, but I think it needs to become systematic. There needs to be either a greenfield build or a building takeover. And
Yeah.
both of them are built to buys in a way. One's from greenfield, one's just from the foundations. but both can be built to buys. And I think that's the right way that this happens in the future. And I think neurovascular is one area that's going to be really, really interesting. I think some of the structural heart cardiovascular. So if you look at Capstan Medical, companies like that. So there's going to be a lot of robotic valve companies coming, valve repair, valve replacement. They're going to be very interesting areas. Robotic ablation systems, where you're going to have visualized ablation, where you can actually see the ablation
Oh,
done.
interesting.
Yeah, there's going to be, I think there's going to be
Yeah.
all kinds of things coming. And some of the next generation of endoluminal therapies are going to be really, really interesting as well. So it's not just going to be endoluminal surgery, so not like too much like EndoQuest, where you're going to have ESDs and things like that. But you're going to have things where you're going to have robots deliver therapies, things like endogenics, or things like you're going to have precision medicine delivered by robots to different parts of the body. And again, these will be just brilliant ideas for build to buys. And someone's going to work out that you're going to have technology stacks. So you're going to need the robot and you're going to need the energy delivery, the pulse field ablation. So what they might do is say, okay, well, we'll do a build to buy where we'll put you two together, a little bit like a private equity build to buy.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
put you two together and we will fund you. You can stay, you stay both independent. You both do what you're doing. You cross over and do your thing, and we will then take the end products into our organization, and we will commercialize them.
So is that similar to, I can't remember the name of the acquisition. Zimmer has the Rosa robot, but
Yep.
then they also acquired the fully autonomous one recently. So do you see that as
Yeah.
like a buy to build to buy kind of thing where now you can play with converging those ecosystems or
In a way, yeah, but that was still more of an acquisition. That was more of a standard
okay.
acquisition. They didn't go out and build Monogram. Monogram
True
was,
monogram, thank you.
yeah.
I forgot.
So Monogram was out there as it was. But I think people will go earlier down the pipe if they've got brains. They'll go earlier in the pipe. First of all, you get it at a lower multiple. That's one of the
Yep.
benefits of you as a company. Um, I think you deploy cash better. Cash into your R&D is never that well leveraged inside a big company. If you take every dollar spent in R&D inside a big company and take every dollar spent in a startup company, I think Joe Mullings was telling me the other day it's like 3 to 5 to 1 ratio of the value that you get per dollar. It just makes sense. If you want your R&D budget to go somewhere, put it into a startup, fuel the hell out of them. And again, it's like what I say on my course. There are big company mentalities, and there are people who are brilliant for big companies, and there are startups and startup mentalities, and they are different human beings, very different human beings. And um, and and I think you've got to let them do the best thing that they do as each group. I mean, taking 5 cents out of a catheter. All my friends that I built startups with would shoot themselves in the head. They just say, I cannot do that. I'm not going to spend my life doing that. Whereas, I've been with some brilliant engineers within places like J&J, where you ask them to get the cost of the spring down by 2 cents, they live for it. You know,
Mhm.
designing that spring or the spring housing or the pulley or whatever in a different way so they can save 2 cents. That's their greatest achievement. And it's brilliant because that's great for the business. That has $1 million impacts on the business. But it's horses for courses, and you've got to have the right people doing the right things and putting your money into the right areas where you get the highest return on investment. And I believe that build to buy or buy build to buy are great ways for you to take a large chunk of your R&D innovation budget, give it to the right people who will treat that really well and bring you back a brilliant product that fits your specifications of what you're looking for.
Gosh, this is so brilliant. So I don't think we've saturated this conversation. I think there's plenty more that we could expand upon. But I actually want to do a little bit of a tangent,
Yep.
just based on your recent adventures with Totally, but also to Microport. And can you remind me the soft tissue robot's name for Microport?
So Microport has a sort of a sub company called Medbot, and Medbot has their robot, which is called To My.
To my thank you. So one of the things I loved about both of those videos you put out, and I'll link them in here, was there's assumption of like cheap robots from China that you dispel tremendously through that video, which from like a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, I loved just watching you immerse in their facilities and just help people understand like this is a very well established company that's progressing these technologies at scale, and they should be taken seriously alongside Intuitive and others. And then for the Hinatoli, just stressing like the Japanese quality and kind of the perceptions that occur or bias that things that come out of Japan are high quality, which in many ways they are. Having lived in Japan for three
Yeah.
years, like I one of the first things I did, I got to see, I played with the Hinatoli for about 15 minutes at a thoracic congress. It was fantastic. I wanted to see it in surgery. I never got to that point during my time there. But I had worked a lot on backlash compensators within J&J for undisclosed instruments. And the very first thing I wanted to do was just test it and see like, okay, how's the responsiveness compared to what I've made? And it's brilliant. And for me, I was early development system, so it wasn't as mature as whatever Ottava will launch with. But I completely understand the standard of quality that Kawasaki will put out,
Yeah.
even though I haven't, experienced it used in surgery. So I guess how do you help viewers understand the discrepancy of assumptions that people make about something that comes from a given country versus what the product actually is and how well it can stand in comparison to other solutions from the US as well? And I know you've been traveling across Spain, like robots are coming from all over the world now.
Yeah.
And how do we navigate this as both innovators but also clinicians as they're making decisions on different solutions that are available to them?
Yeah. I think the first thing that I would say is, I've been a global citizen for a long, long time, and there are biases that come out of each country has its own biases for many reasons. But I think what I would encourage everybody to do first of all is until you've had first-hand experience, don't make assumptions. It's very easy to say, well, it's out of China, so it's low quality. A very interesting small anecdote on that is that I have a friend in Italy who is Chinese, and she and her family run a Chinese shop. And if you look at most of the products that are in there, they are very low quality. So you get the assumption, well, obviously everything that comes out of China is low quality. But then you speak to them and say, why is the quality like this? And they say, because that's what you as the consumer demand.
Hmm.
If you want high quality, we'll import the high quality stuff. But you want the cheap, low quality stuff. That's what you demand. So that's what we provide for you. And it was really when she said, do you think the iPhone's low quality? Because that's built in China.
Hmm.
And so it's clear that from a product point of view, if you ask for low quality, you get low quality. But if you ask for high quality, you get high quality. And I think what you have to assume now is that globally, every country can make to the specifications that the manufacturer wants. So don't assume that if it's made in India, it's going to be of a certain quality. Now, if the manufacturer asks it to be a low quality, cheap product, they will build to that specifications. But what you have to do is go to every product and look what the manufacturer asked it to be. Feel it in your own hands, feel the product, and then make a judgment call on it. Is it good or bad or indifferent? And I think that I would encourage on the robotics side that everybody try firsthand the robots. And it doesn't mean they're all as good as each other. But what it means is you will be able to judge for yourself aspects of quality and build. Now, reliability is a different thing. You can
Hmm.
only get that from usage or whatever, and look, asking for reliability figures. You can't get that while you're testing it. But again, don't make assumptions about what reliability is or isn't. I mean, a great example is that Hinatori, their reliability is not coming just because they're Japanese. Their reliability is becoming because they have a heritage in robotics through Kawasaki.
Hmm.
And they are two very slightly different things. So, yes, Kawasaki is Japanese, and yes, they have a heritage, but I don't know which one it is that means that Hinatori is supremely well built from the robot. My suspicion is it's because they have 30 years of making industrial robots at scale.
Yeah.
Um, but again, I encourage everyone to try every system and make their own judgment call. Go in with a very open mind. I was blown away when I went to Microport. I knew they were quite big because I dealt with them in cardiac, but I didn't understand that they were a big multi-billion-dollar corporation with a lot behind it and a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
people.
Well, and your video was, eye-opening for me just about Shanghai. Like I had never considered Shanghai for future opportunities. I would consider a boomerang back to Japan. So it's just like I watched that and talked with my wife. And I was like, "Do we ever want to go to Shanghai? Because there's cool stuff happening there, robotics.
Yeah,
Like not right now with family
yeah,
needs, but the way that you honored those companies and what they're progressing and carried their story to an international global audience was just incredible. So I enjoyed just the immersion. All the B-roll footage you pulled together was also fantastic. Um, so to expand upon that, when I started at Ethicon in surgical robotics, one of the assumptions around like speed to market was at that time Hugo wasn't released. The only player we were considering, at least internally, was Intuitive at that time. I don't know exactly when we became aware of how far CMR was progressing. This was back in 2016 was when I started.
yeah,
There is this assumption if we're not second to market, like that's going to be a huge hit. There's only going to be three players. The hospitals only have room for so many robots, and you're either first or last, kind of thing. And we thought it's a very disruptive technology. We'll see where ottava lands. You did a great article just showing like who will be second, how long it would it take to actually position enough systems to overtake Intuitive. Was a fantastic article you did. My question though, when I look at vehicle choices, I have, you know, Honda, Toyota, Dodge. There's just so many different minivans I could choose for my kids. And I have an affinity towards the Honda Odyssey because I think it's the superior minivan experience for carting all my kids around. But the reality is like all these companies run really tight margins. They still do the best they can to put as much feature into different levels of that automobile as possible. And there's room in the market for more than one minivan manufacturer. It's a little bit challenging for us as normal humans to imagine that there's space for multiple $1 million robots in the surgical theater. But the reality is, different surgeons have different preferences from open to
yes,
closed console, what instrumentation they like. Are they traditionally using ligatures? And are they excited by Hugo? So, what I thought would be fun as like a closing exercise for us is to go around the horn with like Da Vinci 5, Hugo, your perceptions on Ottava, CMR, Hinatoli, and I already forgot the one from Medbot. I forgot the
to
name.
my
Tunai, and give us potentially an ideal customer avatar in a clinical space that would have a leaning towards Hinatoli because they would love that immersion that comes from the Sony optics or something
yeah,
like that. Because I think helping engineers in these spaces understand that you're not going to serve 100% of clinicians and win 100% of the market. That just isn't going to happen. I think is really helpful to kind of close out the conversation. So if you want to go around them,
yeah.
I think that'd be fun. Yeah. And hey, Pretentious Engineer here. I know you didn't ask, but today's episode of Sunday Sips is sponsored by me and the Big Brain Club on Skool, which is a community of 218 plus big brains that are all collectively building the lives they desire, living where they want, loving what they do, and being paid well for it. And this community helps if your life feels a little bit undefined, with lots of unknown unknowns, disorienting with no path forward, or isolating with no one like me. I basically built the community I needed when I made a crazy exit from Johnson and Johnson in order to continue life in Japan, stepped into entrepreneurship, failed and hit zero at it, and really lacked the community necessary to push me forward in my own ventures. So, this group has left brains, which are engineers and global leaders, right brains are creatives and community builders, whole brains are parents and entrepreneurs. I am currently parenting a child right now. And we have this wonderful interconnected group of people that complete this Find Your Next Journey post where you can see what they're aspiring towards, what they're building towards. So, for instance, Thomas was an engineer I crossed paths with from France, and he shares his origin story, like where he was at or where he's at right now, his desired future state, what he's building towards next, why he wants this change in his life, what he's afraid of. And then he also does this assessment that looks at three dimensions of his journey: how undefined it is, how disoriented it is, how communal it is. And over time, we can measure progress and growth in any of these three dimensions. So I have a free community, Big Brain Club Lite. It's beautiful, it's wonderful. And I also have a paid community, the Big Brain Club Pro, where I do weekly office hours to work people's life in real time. I bring in guest speakers, and I even do one on ones for annual members quarterly to help accelerate their journey. But we have lots of crazy, wonderful people here. Karen is a clinical psychiatrist, Lucas does gamification. Thomas was an engineer. Paul Ritchie was involved with acquisitions at Johnson and Johnson. He's retired. Nick Taylor is an innovator, starting his own business and entrepreneurial journeys in Japan. We used to go to Nomikai together. So this is a really interesting, odd collective community of big brains with the audacity to believe they could actually build the life they desire. So anyway, check it out. There'll be a link below, and happy to connect with you more in these spaces.
With the Da Vinci and the Da Vinci 5, for example, you're looking at the highest end Rolex customers generally. They're looking for incredible reliability. They're really looking for heritage and security, and it's going to work. Plus the entire range of products and all the feature laden set.
Mhm.
There are another group though who will take the Da Vinci because they need a workhorse and they need to do 8 cases a day,
Mhm.
and they know how it works. They know how it enters their workflow, and they're not going to change from it. So there's a whole group of cohorts who've grown up on DaVinci, and they will always use DaVinci. And it's a little bit like me with my iPhone. You'll never get me on an Android, not because
Yeah.
Android might not have some cool features, but I know everything, and I'm in the ecosystem of Apple, and it's just the end of it. Okay, Apple's got me forever. Damn them. Um, but but um, I think that is kind of where a lot of the Da Vinci folks are, and nobody gets fired for buying an IBM. So administrators and stuff, it's a sure bet. I don't disrupt the surgical sterile services. I don't upset the nursing staff. Everyone's got it. If I buy a third, fourth, fifth Da Vinci, everyone's going to be no one's going to be disappointed with the Da Vinci. So I think that's where they occupy in my mind in the space.
Mhm.
Then, if I go to someone like Hinatori, I think that that's going to be Japanese for Japanese.
Yep.
There's a cultural bias towards if I can have a Japanese product that works as well, then I'll take the Japanese. It's a very much a support the local national cause. So I think that it will do very well in Japan, and a lot of Japanese surgeons who are not needing the stapler just now and are not needing some of the other advanced energies and stuff. Oh, it keeps doing it. Keep doing some of the advanced energies and stuff. Um, they they will be loyal into the nationalistic pride and Kawasaki, and they will be not disappointed with it at all, and it will do very, very well for them. There will be some parts of Southeast Asia that look to Japan as the quality capital and will buy into that and go for it. And they'll quite often be surgeons who didn't ever quite get onto Da Vinci or never got quite there, but now they have an opportunity to get onto another robot and they get onto that. I think if you then come to Hugo will be Medtronic loyalists. I think there'll be a lot of Medtronic loyalists who, they like the LigaSure. When Signia comes onto it, they like the Signia. They trust those brands. I think that they'll be loyalists onto the Medtronic system. You have a lot of laparoscopic surgeons who never really got on with the immersed console. They felt like that's not how you quite do lap surgery.
Yeah,
They
because it
went,
disconnects them from the OR staff,
yes,
right?
yeah, it does. And they're used to situational awareness. Robotic prostate surgeons never really did that before, so they don't know anything different in the paradigm. But there's a lot of surgeons out there who love the immersion. They feel like they're inside the patient. But there's a huge, I'd say about 50%, who basically say, I prefer to be watching the arms, watching the staff, seeing the stapler going in, etc., etc. And there's for the modular systems as well. People want to work the way they like to work. I want to put the ports where I've put them for the last 25 years. And I'm not changing to put them where the robot tells me to put them. And the modular systems, to some lesser degree, allow you to be more liberal with your ports and put them where you're used to. And that allows two things. One is familiarity with the angles of the instruments, the whole way the procedure works. But the second thing it allows is that you can do part of the procedure laparoscopic very easily with the reach, go out, bring the robot in, dock it in, and then continue the rest with the robot. or vice versa, do a bit with the robot and then finish up with the, and that modularity allows people to have that freedom of port placement. And there is a philosophical group of surgeons out there who want to dictate how the surgery is done, not the way the robot says. So you've got that. They're all going to need other staplers and stuff. You're going to have the J&J Ottava, which is going to be J&J loyalists who, they love the J&J products. They love the staplers. They're big into the, and they'll be loyalists towards J&J. And some of them will be the innovators who will say, no one's done the bed thing at scale before. It has been done, by the way, but it's just not been done
Yeah.
at
I
scale.
had no idea about that before this
Yeah,
conversation, which is really interesting that
there's
they're
about
founders of
five robots. So
5.
just quickly on that, then I'll tell you. So there's an Iranian
Curious.
robot out there called Sina Medical. That's bed mounted. You've got Revolve Medical from Canada that's bed mounted. You've got the original Computer Motion Zeus, which is bed mounted. The original Versius was bed mounted. You've got the DLR that was the original Hugo was bed mounted. None of them succeeded. So I'm curious to
Interesting.
see. Yeah, I'm curious to see how the verb succeeds.
There's lots of
Um,
challenges with bed mounted
well,
from a workflow and an inverted pendulum, so it's fun.
yeah, exactly, and also it's, if it locks up, you've got a cage around the patient, whereas every other one you can move them out. If the robot breaks, the bed breaks. There's lots of things that can go wrong. I don't think it will. I think they'll be fine, and I think they'll find their place, and I think that they'll find a cohort of people. And there'll be also that group who are trying to get into the J&J polyphonic architecture, and if they can get that right as well. So there is more of the vision of Scott Hunnikin's 4.0 eventually comes there, the integration of Dualto and all that kind of good stuff. And I think you'll have some fans who'll be J&J fans, and they'll use their might of their power as well to deal with that. So I think you'll get some there. Then you're going to have the telesurgery fans that are really going to go after the 2MI.
Yep.
2MI is all, and Edge Surgical is about telesurgery. You have a lot of people who are very anti-American. There's lots people forget there's a lot of anti-American product companies, hospitals out there don't want American products in there for whatever reason. They just don't want them. They'd rather take a Chinese. China's going to be big for the Chinese robots. Some of Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa. Intuitive's not been down there before. The Chinese robots are giving lots and love and attention to North Africa, Central Africa. A lot of robots going to, like Angola's got a robot. There's some other ones going to different countries across Africa because the Chinese don't seem to mind that. They don't really care whether it's Africa or not, and they're willing to put in the architecture and do that. So I think you'll find a whole group of surgeons who either never had access to robots can get onto the Chinese robots. Then you've got India, SSI. They're going to dominate in India, made for India, in India, by Indians, for India. Big nationalistic push there. Modi has been a big push on that. Intuitive is still number one there, but I think SSI is already number two now with over 100 robots in there. Who am I missing? Who did I not cover?
CMR.
Oh, CMR.
Your
Yeah,
baby.
yeah. So I think CMR again is for the laparoscopic surgeons who really never got on with intuitive, and that is the ultimate mobile modular robot because it's a very small modular robot, and the way the arms work is one of the most genius things ever in terms of the way the arms work.
Because it's similar to a handwritten
Yeah,
pen, right? So you have
yeah.
a smaller footprint with CMR than
Smaller
a
footprint, and you
Hugo.
can bring arms closer together. There's very little movement. It's not very dramatic above the patient. You can get ports really close. Um,
Interesting.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really clever architecture, and it allows you to honestly operate as if you were doing laparoscopic. It's brilliant for that.
And you would
It
just do stapling on a side port, right? Like they don't have a
for
stapling
for
range.
today, for
Yeah, yeah.
today, but
Currently.
there's no doubts that that system can have the capability to have a stapler should they ever get round to it. I would have no doubts about that. They've got some advanced energy already. They'll get more advanced energy. They've got ICG, white light ICG. It's a beautiful system, and I think that for surgeons who really want to be in the laparoscopic way of thinking where it's my procedure follows my rules, I think Versius is the ultimate embodiment of that. I still believe that today. I believed it when I sold it, and I believe it today. And I've still talked to a lot of users of it who say, you promised me that this would be feeling like I'm working as I did, and it is. So I think that's the group that will go after. And what's interesting is some of the smaller formats like CMR will also be for ASCs.
Yes.
Don't rule out an ASCs. Versus is a 38 by 38 footprint each one, and it tucks down to nothing when it's away, and that's the most important thing. Not when it's operating, but how much occupancy of space does it take? It doesn't have its own tower. It has just the console and the forearms. And the forearms are literally, can't do it there, but this wide, and it tucks right down. And that shouldn't be underestimated. Things like that. So I think, yes, also it won't be just which kind of archetype of surgeons; it'll also be which site of care. And Moon, I think, should do good. I think, for those who want to do laparoscopic, I think they'll do good. Um, and it'll be horses for courses. I think there's room for everybody, but intuitive will still dominate for and people can go read my article of why it's just a mathematical number.
Oh my gosh, this is so helpful. And then the one thing you didn't touch on across all the platforms for people that really care about maybe not immersion, but just like the highest quality 4K vision, where would that go across all the partners?
Yeah, so they're all going to get so they've all got HD, 3D, and they're all moving to 4K camera systems and optics. A little bit of the challenge on that is the size of the chips that you need for each eye of the camera, and you end up with a very big camera. So if you're looking chip on stick, it's just a bigger to get 4K. It's just a bigger chip, but everyone's getting there. And if you look at Hinatori has Rubina 4K. It's a 4K headset. It's a 4K. Tumai's got HD at the minute, up rating to 4K. Intuitive has a 4K headset, but it's now going to upgrade. I think it'll upgrade its camera very soon to a 4K camera. Everyone's going to upgrade to 4K. That's just
They're
going
all
to
catching
become,
up.
yeah, it's all going to
Standard.
be table stakes. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think 8K is nonsense. I think that you wouldn't, if you had a 4K or an 8K, you would not be able to tell the difference. The only advantage is if you want to do some kind of weird digital zooms, you won't get pixelation. But standard 8K will be a bit nonsensical in my mind.
Excellent. I think you've exhausted every lingering question I had, or at
Okay.
least anything that I could think about. I mean, this has been such a beautiful exploration. Hi, little love. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
we
can
good.
play. You can go play. Go ahead. She wants to play PlayStation. That's my middle
Okay.
daughter. Um, but yeah, this has been incredibly valuable for folks who are nerds in the robotic spaces because it's beautiful seeing how you curate your content and the conversations you have. But for me, selfishly, it's great to be able to have you wander across areas of interest more directly. So I hope this was helpful and encouraging to folks that see it. And then for anyone who wants to connect with you, the best pathway is through LinkedIn,
Yeah.
is my understanding. And then I've also been a huge fan of your digital course, How to Start Up in MedTech. I worked through all of it in the minivan between my commutes on third shift, which has been really fun and humbling. And for anyone who's interested in taking that course, if they use Big Brain 30 as a promo code, they can get 30% off, which I would highly suggest. It's been life changing for me, just navigating it and figuring out how I could apply these learnings into whatever medtech startups I'm part of in the future. Um, but yeah, appreciate you, Steve. That's all
No,
I got.
thank you. It's been a great conversation, and I'll talk forever on this. So forgive me if I ramble on a little bit, but I love it, right? And I mean, what's cooler than surgical robotics, AI, autonomy, all these cool things? I just don't think it could be cooler for anyone, and I hope that it's interesting for your readers, even if they're not in the surgical space or the medical space. I do hope that they find it just a lot of the things that are in here. I'm sure reflect across on many, many other industries. If you take the word robot out and put drone in there, or you put something else in there, I'm sure it will reflect across many, many industries. And I would suggest that people, whenever they listen to these conversations, if it's not their field, don't listen to the actual conversation in its exact words. Listen to the sense of the talking around the subject. I think that's one of the ways you can suck some of the information out of this stuff as well.
Sorry, I'm texting my wife to help because my daughter turned Minecraft on at like 100 volume. And I'm stuck over here, but I don't know if it'll come through or not. But The other thing that you forgot to mention, you just launched a book. So I don't know if you want
Yes.
to plug your book really quick
Oh,
as well.
yeah, I did. Look, it's even here. Look, it's real. It's real, and it's a beast.
So
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, and it's purple because I always do purple. So yeah, it's basically I've written it. It's a 35-year journey, taking all my lessons from the big companies and the startups, and picking the brains of some of the best people in the world of startups for medtech. And this is a pure medtech book, so it's not biotech, it's not pharma, it's medtech. Um, but what it does, it basically takes you on 100 tips of the disaster, scar tissue, lessons, things you should do, shouldn't do. And it's sort of written as a survival guide, because that's basically what it is as a startup: is you survive each day and get to the next day. Um, yeah, and that's out now on Amazon for. So if you have got any med tech people on there and they're thinking of a startup, it will save you a lot of tears and pain and crying. So yeah, you might want to read it. You can get it on Kindle ebook and printed format.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I hope people pick up the book. I hope they glean even more from this conversation. And do you have any lingering big brain ideas or thoughts for folks to sip on from your reflection
No,
before we close out?
I just think that for communities who are coming to learn, I think look across all of the industries of what's happening at the minute. And there are themes across all of the industries, AI, for example, or crypto, or different things that are happening across all of the industries. That whatever industry you're in or want to be in, be um, be open minded across all the industries, and try and be Renaissance is the word that I was looking for. So the Renaissance best artists were able to paint, draw, write, sculpt, and they would study all across the arts. And I would say be Renaissance big brains. Don't be just down one small corridor. Look across everything, because you'll glean insights from so many places that you can apply to your daily big brain what activity, whatever you're doing. And I think today we live in a world where we've got access to so many things at once, but look wide and take interest in a lot of wider things. That would be my only thing that I would say to the big brain group.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, you're encouraging folks to dabble and explore
Yeah.
across their different problem spaces and see where those discoveries can lead them, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. But Steve Bell, thank you so much for the time, and I'm excited to see when you pop back on in the future.
Thank you. And I'm always happy to come on and talk.
So, hey, friend, I hope you've enjoyed this discussion with Steve Bell, and I want to share 5 big brain ideas he dropped across the duration of this podcast just to summarize and synthesize all the learnings we've had thus far. And let me know in the comments what was most applicable to you, whether it was something on my list or something else that he shared that you thought was deeply applicable in your journey. But before we do this, I'd love to share a couple next steps with you so that you could accelerate your own journey as an innovator in these spaces. The first of which is connect with Steve. So there'll be some links below in the description. The first of which is just joining Steve's LinkedIn and following him. He drops amazing content consistently. I'll also share a link to his website, How to Start Up in MedTech, where he has a paid blog, which is honestly a gold mine of insights. He puts a crazy amount of effort into the blogs he curates and the deep dives he does on different companies. And remember, if you're looking to actually develop as a startup founder or moving into the medtech startup spaces, I would highly suggest you take his course, How to Start Up in MedTech. It is phenomenal. It's been life changing for me. You've already seen my testimonial in this video. And if you use the promo code BIGBRAIN30 with all caps, you'll get 30% off, which is wild and incredibly generous from Steve. So I'd encourage you to check out that course. Next, if you are looking for the right consultant to partner with you in your innovative journey, particularly if you're looking towards digital innovation, digital twins, AR, VR, anything in those spaces, again, I would highly recommend Kinetic Vision. There is a link to join a waitlist for their services. You'll learn a bit more about my testimonial working with them and find ways to kind of assess where you are right now, answer a couple questions, and then a member of the team can reach out to figure out if they could scope the right exploratory work with you to get that project moving forward quickly. So check out Kinetic Vision. There's a waitlist below. And then finally, if you want to hang out with me and some other crazy big brains across the left brains, which are the engineers and global leaders, the right brains are the creatives and the community builders, as well as whole brains are entrepreneurs and parents, then I have this community of 200 plus big brains called the Big Brain Club that you're more than welcome to pop in and try. The free community, Big Brain Club Lite, will help you find your next and kind of figure out what's your target, what are you building towards. And then if you'd like to accelerate that journey, I also have a paid community called the Big Brain Club Pro, where we have weekly office hours. And for some folks that move up to annual, I do one-on-ones quarterly with those members. So feel free to check that out. I've put a year of work into building this community and I love it. I love the people there. I genuinely know them. It'd be great to include you in that space as well. And then finally, if you can't get enough from this conversation, like you want more, okay, some people need more. I am doing a deep dive review of it. I've put a whole bunch of markers in my editing process. Here, I can show you really quick. Let's do, where's the magic buttons? We want to do wide desktop. Oh my goodness, not that. What is going on here? Something terrible. We should never do that again. Oh, I know what's happening. Um, let me fix it. Put that up there. Nope, it's messed up forever. Here we go. I just click this button. And that button, this button. All the buttons. There we go. Okay. So if you want to see my editing process really quick, sorry for that. That was probably a trip. I have been putting these little markers down all over the edit. And then what I'll do is a second SIPS review where I'll pull up a quick, I don't know, 10-second clip and then go deep with my sketch pad. I'll pull up videos of different robotic systems. So this second SIPS episode, there'll be a link in the bio as well, or a link in the description as well. And I have, I think, a total of like 40 markers. So we'll see if I even get through all of them. But there's just so many areas where Steve was talking and I have other thoughts, other things I'd love to share and show you that I couldn't because I got to roll with him in this conversation. So I hope Second Sips is really helpful for you. So with that, I think we're ready to jump back into Steve's. Oh no, 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 what have I done? I've broken it all. We have a recursive window. Stop it. There we go. This one. So funny. Okay, so let's go back and do his big brain ideas. Here we go. We're fine. We fixed it. Everybody's safe. So, the first big brain idea we have from Steve is if you go back to the origins, they genuinely tell you where these things come from. So, one of the beautiful insights I had when I was working at Johnson and Johnson and Ottava, especially in the early days, and I looked at every robotic system that existed or where we thought other competitors were moving, and I saw the Ottava system, I was like, oh my God, we have a table mounted system. This is crazy. This has never been done before. This is going to change the world. And I genuinely believe that it will. But to hear that in the very early days of Intuitive, there was also another venture combined with it, Computer Motion, I think was what it was called. I might have messed up the last word, that had a table mounted architecture, and that there's been multiple table mounted architectures attempted in the past. And for me as an engineer, I've always loved connecting with people that have been in a business for 10, 20, 30 years innovating to understand what led to the innovations they've created, what patterns did they have to work around, what problems were they trying to solve, how do we look at the technology available today and push it farther, break through the constraints of the past. When you go back to the origin, it kind of can show you where you can move next and where everyone else is moving as well. So this is something I genuinely love and found just a beautiful, deep insight from Steve, who's been around the industry for 3+ decades, right? It's phenomenal to be able to pick his brain. Second, this is an insight Steve shared from Joe Mullings that it takes 1 billion to commercialize in surgical robotics. And this is really one of the defining or driving factors of the build to buy model that make it so valuable is it takes so much time to open up all of these different offices, corporate offices in other countries and work through all their regulatory pathways and all their reimbursement and get the commercial units set up and scaled, that if you already have a global footprint kind of company like a Johnson & Johnson, a Stryker, a Medtronic, if you can develop an asset in a startup ecosystem quickly and then leverage the scale of that commercial organization to push it out, that's a huge unlock versus raising enough capital to scale your global commercial teams across multiple regions to then get the market. So it takes 1 billion to commercialize in surgical robotics. That's just commercializing, right? You still have to create the robot on the front end. J&J's invested multiple billions across Verb and Oris, some and numbers undisclosed that I've seen. Okay, it's a lot of money, more than I'll probably ever touch. The third insight that he shared, the dog wagging its tail versus a fully integrated startup. So one of the challenges between the Ethicon Verb Oris ecosystem, particularly in the Ethicon Verb days, was both teams not knowing if they were the dog or the tail. The tools, the instruments have to sit on the robot, the dog. The tools should be the tail. But organizationally, J&J was bankrolling the venture. Ethicon knew how to launch, surgical devices through the FDA. We knew all the ins and outs of it that we believed. So are we the dog telling the tail, which is the startup, what they should or shouldn't do? There were so many moments of technical and political lockout that occurred because neither company in some ways had the authority to tell the other one what to do. I think politics is what's delayed ottava the most, not technology. And what Steve is advocating for with this fully integrated startup, for instance, with the Olympus venture, is that you really need to take talent out of your existing strategic, like Olympus, implant it directly in the startup, and everything needs to be vertically integrated in that startup under the CEO. And then if you need any external counsel, you can pull on that, but it needs to run as one team. This was I heard similar feedback from a member of can I share this? I will de-identify 100% of it. There was a member of Ethicon that we had hunted from a leading robotics company. See how de-identified it is? And one of the things he shared, which was incredibly helpful, was that we had instrument teams, and then we had robotics controls teams and the robot teams, and they were all segmented working across different interface boundaries. And he was explaining like everybody's kind of on one team. Like where he worked, right? Like they didn't have this weird segmented instruments robot culture. Like, yes, you have people that make the end effectors and people that make the robot, but end to end, it's the system that delivers the clinical value. So you have to do trade-offs across that whole end to end. And politics and where you're setting these boundaries and who's getting paid for what downstream and commercial, it all makes that ecosystem very complicated. So that's why Steve and I are both incredibly hopeful about what Olympus is doing with EndoSwan or with Swan Endosurgical, because it seems like they're going to have a truly integrated startup with 500 million bankrolling them and leveraging the best in class technologies that already exist from the Olympus ecosystem. So it's very exciting. Um, like that's one of the edges of build to buy. Number four, B2B build to buy allows CEOs to be focused on the right things that push the business forward. So in his course, which again, I highly recommend you work through, use that promo code that I got for you. He, he discusses in quite a few modules like the CEO just has to be ruthlessly focused on getting money, getting money, getting money. And a lot of times people lean into the CEO pathway as a technologist first. And it's a surprise that they can't be in the weeds with the tech because they have to go out and get so much money. For the folks I'm hanging out with, my baby, he's got Cheez Its, so he's very excited. And the value of the build to buy as well, you still have stakeholder management, you still have dog and pony shows, which I experienced at Johnson and Johnson to keep stakeholders engaged in the mission and the vision and future rounds of funding. It is different because you could go into the weeds a bit more. You could be more proximal with other members of your C suite and really focus on delivering the best technology for the right clinicians, right? That scales well. So that was the fourth insight. No, you can't have that one. He ran off with more Cheez Its. And number five, and this one, it should surprise you, but it really is quite clear in many ways. Um, it's just the right people, the right things, the right investments, and then you get leverage and an ROI. And I just loved the way this was so well versed because when I replay different moments in my career and things I've seen, this is what my son's given me. I don't want to open it because it'll be too crinkly, but he's lingering. You have some, eat those. There you go. There's something simple about getting the right people, the right things that you're working on, and investing the right capital and the right talent around it. That's where you're going to get leverage and a high ROI. And this is particularly more valuable in a startup ecosystem versus within traditional R&D organizations and large strategics, is at least what he argues. So anyway, those are Steve's Big Five. You get all your next steps. If this is valuable or helpful to you, feel free to subscribe. But also, I would encourage you, send an email to a friend, send a DM, forward this video out personally because the algorithm picks it up when you do something, when you take action around it. And I would love for this story to go out farther because Steve has such beautiful insights. And I'm curating the conversations I wish I had proximity to when I was deep in the weeds at J&J trying to progress new surgical robotics technologies without knowing the full picture. As I've expanded in my career and seen more, traveled the region in Japan, connected with clinicians, saw cases myself, you start to innovate differently when you see everything. So I hope this is helpful. Keep changing the world. And naturally, you could sip on that.